Hello everyone, my name is Vibin Abram and welcome back to this channel. So we have completed our first chapter, that is electric charges and fields, and videos are there in the channel. You guys can go check that out. So today we are going to start our new chapter, that is chapter number 2, electrostatic potential and capacitance. So this will be an introductory video. We will be talking about what all topics that we are going to cover in this particular chapter. So without wasting any more time, let's get started. So this chapter is known as electrostatic potential and capacitance. As the name suggests, electrostatic, that means again we are talking about charges which are at rest. Electrostatics, that means your electrons are at rest. That means in this chapter also we will be talking about charges when they are at rest. We are going to talk about a new term that is known as a potential. So in our first chapter we talked about electrostatic force, we talked about electric field. In this chapter we will talk about electrostatic potential. So if you guys remember, in 11th standard we talked about a term known as potential energy, and if we remember correctly, so potential energy was associated with conservative forces, yes or no? Now here electrostatic, if you guys remember, examples of conservative forces were your gravitational force, spring force, or in this particular case electrostatic force, because electrostatic force, there we talked about that electrostatic is also a conservative force. So you guys can say electrostatic potential, that means again here the force is conservative in nature. So this is the new term we are going to study, that is electrostatic potential. This is something which we are going to talk about in this chapter. And capacitance, now capacitance is related to capacitors. Now what are capacitors? Capacitors are your electrical device which actually stores energy. Now capacitance is the ability of that capacitor or that electrical device to store energy. So this is something which we will study in this chapter. So let's move forward. Let's look at what are the topics that we are going to study. It's a long list. Let's get to it. The first topic is electric potential at a point. We will talk about electric potential. First of all, talk about what is electric potential, okay? And then we'll talk about what is electric potential at a point. At a point, how you can find out the electric potential. Second topic is electric potential at a point due to a point charge. Now in this particular case I will bring a point charge. Now because of that point charge at any particular place, what will be the value of electric potential? This is what we are going to talk about. Next is your electric potential difference. Now this is the fact, there is no such term as electric potential for a single point. We always define it for potential difference. We always talk about potential difference. We will talk about that, like how I can actually make the potential difference change to potential at a point. We will talk about that in the coming videos. So the fourth point is electric potential difference inside uniform electric field. So inside your uniform electric field, what will be the value of electric potential difference? We will talk about that. Next is electric potential difference inside electric field produced by charge Q. So if you have any charge Q, obviously this charge Q is going to produce electric field. We will talk about what will be the electric potential inside that electric field that is produced by the point Q charge. We will talk about that. Great. Next is potential due to an electric dipole. So if we have a dipole, so because of that dipole, what will be the value of electric potential at different points? We will talk about that. Then potential due to a system of charges. What will happen, for example, if there are more than one charges, let's say we have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 charges. So because of all these charges, what will be the combined effect of potential, electric potential at any particular point? We'll talk about that. Then we'll talk about equipotential surface. Now what do we mean by equipotential surface? We will discuss it. I don't want to disclose it here. We'll talk about that. Then potential energy of a system of charges. Then we come to this important terminology, that is potential energy because of different system of charges, because of 2 system of charges, because of 3 system of charges. We'll talk about that. Potential energy in an external field. For example, if you are given an external field and we have charges inside, so what will be the potential energy inside that external field? We'll talk about that. Then We'll talk about electrostatics of conductors. We'll talk about conductors in this particular topic. We'll talk about what will happen if you give charge to the conductor. Will it remain at the surface? What happens inside of the conductor, right? So we'll talk about different properties of conductors basically in that particular in electrostatics of conductor. Okay, great. Dielectrics and polarization. Again, we are going to talk about matter. We'll talk about we have studied in our first chapter about polar and non-polar materials. We'll talk about that in this particular topic, that is dielectrics and polarization. We'll talk about what are polar molecules, what are non-polar molecules, and how they make the difference between dielectrics and polarization, right? We'll talk about that. Great. Next is capacitors and capacitance. As I said, capacitor is a device which actually stores energy. Capacitance is the ability of the device to store energy. We'll talk about that. Okay, then there are many types of capacitors: spherical, cylindrical. One of the type is parallel plate capacitor, which we are going to talk about in our syllabus, right? Then effect of dielectric on a capacitance. So what will happen if we have a parallel plate capacitor, and if I insert a dielectric in between, what will happen to the capacitance of that capacitor? We will talk about that. Then combination of capacitors. We know, as in the case of resistors, we talked about what will happen to the combined resistance when the resistors are connected in series or the resistors are connected in parallel. So very similarly, what will happen to capacitors when they're connected in series, when they're connected in parallel? We will talk about that. Last final topic that we'll talk about is energy that is stored inside capacitors. How to calculate the energy that is being storing inside the capacitor. That is something we are going to talk about. These are the topics that we are going to learn in this chapter, so stay tuned for further videos. We are going to cover all the topics, so stay tuned.